Well, my friend, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can figure out what content to post on Patreon based on your creative project and the way that you like to create. I've ultimately made this to become an ultimate guide on Patreon content and how to go about it. So let's honestly dive right into this. So, the best way to build a successful Patreon is to consistently release new content by combining a recurring content strategy with a content calendar. Recurring content allows you to build your audience, optimize your membership tiers, and make sure your supporters keep coming back for more. So this is really going to be focusing on creating content for Patreon, like say for those individual tiers. If you want to learn a little bit more about how you can use content to actually get Patreon followers and supporters in the first place, there'll be a video up here that'll dive a bit more into that topic in particular. So I think this is very important because if supporters don't feel like they're getting any use out of your Patreon because you simply aren't posting enough or aren't posting anything that they actually enjoy, it's no secret that they will eventually stop paying for your Patreon. And if you slack on freely releasing content to non-patrons on like social media, anything like that, your potential patrons are likely to unfollow you and never get around to actually supporting you on Patreon in the first place. So this really shows how important content is, not only in getting Patreon supporters, but making sure that they actually stick around. So let's dive into this. And before we do, I just wanted to also show you that I've made an article on this topic as well. So if you'd like to follow along, or if you simply prefer the written word format, you could simply look up Patreon content Best Friends Club on Google, and you'll get access to this completely free guide. So let's dive right into it. So how can you create a recurring content strategy for your Patreon page? So Patreon recommends that you should charge monthly if you're producing more than 4 pieces of content per month, and that the average number that per creation Patreon creators publish is about 3. So regardless of what way you choose to charge your potential patrons, there's one thing that is absolutely clear, and that is you're going to need to be able to post content that your patrons actually enjoy regularly if you want to be successful on Patreon. So in my understanding, that the best way to do this is by creating what's called a recurring content strategy. And a recurring content strategy is simply a defined structure of different content types that you release on a regular schedule. So for Patreon, this could look like posting update videos on the first Friday of each month, posting a new song or creation on the second Friday of each month, and having a live streamed Q&A session on the last Friday of each month, so on and so forth. By releasing content on a regular schedule like this, with a kind of predefined structure like this, you can make sure that the content you create is both relevant to your ultimate goal as a creator and make sure that you keep your audience hooked and wanting to come back for more and more. So how do you actually go about creating a recurring content strategy? So there's about 5 steps that we're going to go through, and you can follow along and build out your own recurring content strategy. So the very first step that you're going to want to do is decide on your ultimate creative goal as a creator. So to make sure that you don't feel like you're wasting your time and energy on creating content, you should take a moment to make sure that the content that you plan on creating is always supporting your ultimate creative goal. So it's important that this goal isn't your financial or lifestyle goal that you want to achieve, like something like making $10,000 a month or being able to just live off of your art. And it instead should be focused on what creative goals you have. So what you want to be creating and providing to the world. So do you want to reach thousands of people with your art so that it might have a meaningful and positive impact on those thousands of people's lives? Your content might be of you creating your art behind the scenes, showing off unreleased or work in progress creations, or releasing your art to the public, but doing a deep dive into its creation and its meaning on the Patreon side. Do you ultimately want to perform often in front of a loving audience of thousands of fans? In that case, your content might be you performing live in different ways. So it could be performance videos, live jams, improvisations, cover songs, those kinds of content pieces. So it's important here to first define your ultimate creative goal. What is it that you actually are trying to achieve? It could be more than one ultimate creative goal. Definitely keep that in mind. So then, once that is decided, the next step number 2, is to look at the content you're already creating. So when deciding what type of Patreon content you want to create, you should definitely take a moment to look at what you are already spending your time creating each and every single day. It's important to remember that Patreon describes itself as a platform for creators to get paid for creating the things that they are already creating. This means you don't need to go overboard or overthink the content ideas for your Patreon, because you can focus on simply documenting your creation process instead of creating anything new and excessive or anything like that. So look at how you are currently creating to find opportunities for behind-the-scenes content, additional access, or other ways to simply document what you're already doing instead of creating anything brand new. You could always use that kind of brand new creation process and plan for creating brand new stuff for like deeper tiers in the Patreon membership tier kind of structure. So next, step 3 is going to be to brainstorm content types or themes that you want to test. So once you've clearly defined your ultimate creative goals and you've reviewed your current content creation process, all you need to do is brainstorm a list of different types of content that you might want to publish. Go nuts and create a really big list here, because we will be whittling down this list in the next 2 steps, or the final 2 steps really. So it's important here to remember that 2 things. 1, you are looking for content types or themes and not specific content pieces that you'll be creating. So this might be something like performance videos and not performances of my song called I Love Matt from Best Friends Club. So it's the actual type or category of content and not the individual piece of content. Next is that this list is of potential ideas that you might want to test, and you are in no way committed to creating any of these content ideas just because you've wrote them down in this brainstorming kind of step. So it's important that you look at your Patreon membership as an iterative process. Your first launch will really be a trial where you're going to figure out what does and does not work for you, so that you can then modify your tiers, perks, and rewards to match what your audience actually wants with the type of content you're actually able to create without burning out or kind of getting upset with the whole content creation process, because it can be quite challenging. So then we're going to move on to step 4, which is looking at what content types give you the most bang for your buck. So now that you have a big juicy list of different content types that you can potentially create that supports your ultimate creative goal or things that you're already creating anyway, it's time to narrow this list down to what you'll actually be creating. So some content types will appeal to you more than others just naturally, and you can definitely jot those down when you're creating your final content list. However, the one piece of advice that I would give here is to look for the content types that will give you the most bang for your buck. So an example of this would be looking for content types that can be repurposed for other uses. So this could be things like making the full content piece available on Patreon, but also cutting up clips of that content to post on social media as a way to tease the kind of content that a potential patron can get when they become a supporter, or things like content that could potentially be bundled up later to be sold as a product or put in a course later on down the line. The idea here is looking for some content types where obviously it's going to be that one content piece that you'll be able to put up, but by creating that piece of content, you'll be able to use it in other ways that also benefit you in your business and your creative project. Next is to look for content types that can be batched. So when you're creating them. So the idea here is creating 4 or 5 pieces of a single content type while you have everything set up and ready to go. Because there's something called basically opportunity costs and switching costs. So, or rather, there's something called switching costs, not opportunity costs, where if you go through the process of creating one content piece, setting up the cameras, all that kind of stuff, then stop, then create the content, then stop, and then edit, there's a little bit of momentum that you're going to be losing here. It makes more sense to set everything up in terms of cameras, lighting, all that kind of stuff, film 4 or 5 pieces of content so that you're in the like kind of the mindset and you have the momentum of building content in that moment, and then take those 4 or 5 pieces and then just edit. So you're just focusing on editing. This way you're going to get a lot more bang for your buck while you're creating. And lastly, a way for you to do this is to look for content types that can be stretched out to create several pieces of different content. And this could be things like live streaming your creative process instead of just posting a video. So this way you're getting 2 pieces. Or doing things like filming a full live concert instead of making videos for 4 individual performance videos. This way you have the one huge kind of live concert content piece, as well as then you can cut that up into 4 or 5 individual performances. So it's important also, when you're doing this, that you look for a balance in your recurring content strategy between what your audience will enjoy and what you can realistically create over and over and over again without burning yourself out or hating yourself. So you're going to want to enjoy the content that you pick here, and by doing things like batching the content and knowing that when you do create a piece of content that you're going to be able to repurpose it for a lot of things, it can help a lot in the creation process because you know that your time's not being wasted. It's being used really effectively by sitting down to create that content piece. It's actually going to be content for maybe the next whole month, or it's going to be something that you could offer in multiple tiers, or it's going to be something you can also throw into social media to tease out your content and bring in new patrons. The idea is when you create content, you want to get the most out of it as possible. Then the last fifth and final step here is to actually put it on a content calendar. So once you have an idea of what different types of content you want to make, you can simply map out when these content types will go live and where they'll go live on a calendar. This simple step makes sure that you are held accountable for your strategy and to your patrons, as well as it helps you organize your content output for the week, month, or even the whole year, which is where the content calendar comes in. So a content calendar simply takes the content you've mapped out with your recurring content strategy, plots out each piece of content, when it should go live, where it should go live on a calendar so that you can actually follow your plan. This can also help you spot any gaps in your content release schedule, keep an eye on any big milestones or key dates since you're using a calendar, and it gives you a good idea of when you need to have your content ready so that you can make time to actually create, publish it, schedule it, any of that kind of stuff. Also, although there are plenty of apps and templates out there for creating a content calendar, in my experience, this doesn't need to be complicated whatsoever, and you can simply use the calendar that you're already using. Whether that's pen or paper, Google or Apple Calendar, or something like Notion or Asana, whichever calendar that you're actually going to check often and update is the best one for you. So, with that out of the way, some patron content ideas that you can actually use in your own recurring content strategy and to map out into your content calendar. So the best content ideas for Patreon revolve around content that can be potential rewards, perks, tiers, and they fall into these categories generally. First is access or additional insight. Second is additional engagement. Third is fan recognition. And fourth is digital or physical bonuses. Here are some examples that you might want to consider. Things like extra exclusive content, which could be informative or personal behind the scenes content. So it could be like more personal would be like, oh, how I created this, and here's the project files, that kind of stuff. Informative might be like how you can create something like this, more like tutorial based stuff. This could also be bonus episodes, videos, songs, art, early drafts, work in progress, stems for your own projects or original project files, anything like that. You could also do question and answer sessions, which could have higher priority to Patreon questions, or these can only be accessible to patrons. And you could also have fan participation of content, which could be voting in focus groups, making them have a say in what content you create, allowing them to do requests, which could be either in the content that you're creating, as far as merch that you're printing out, songs that you're creating, what kind of videos you're going to do, that kind of thing. And finally, in addition to this, a great way to figure out the actual content that you're going to create is to look at your current fans and audience. So you can straight up ask them what they want or what they're looking for, and you could also look at your free content here in a way too, by just seeing what people are engaging with the most, liking, commenting in the most, those kind of things. So how could you actually turn all of this into not a creative, well, it will be creative, but more of an effective Patreon tier system? So I did go over this in a video before, and I will put a link to it above, but the best way to create highly effective tiers for your Patreon or membership is by leveraging a concept used in marketing called marketing funnels or funnel mapping. So a marketing funnel is visualized as an inverted pyramid and is used to break down what you offer to your audience in 3 specific parts. Here's a beautiful drawing of what I did. At the top here is the largest part, which is called the top of funnel, aka the tofu section, and it represents the cheapest but most easily accessible offering. So here, you're definitely going to want to focus on kind of content that you're already creating, so documenting stuff you're already doing. Because it's the lowest price tier, you don't want to go overboard in creating anything extra special really here. It's really more about allowing people to support you and adding a little bit of extra access, that kind of stuff. Moving beyond that is the more expensive tier called the middle of funnel or MOFU tier, and it represents more expensive offerings that less of your audience will take, and this could be, more specialized content. And lastly, moving into the smallest part, which is the bottom of funnel or BOFU, which represents very high ticket offerings, maybe like around $300 or so. Very few of your audience will take this, but this will be like hyper-personalized, hyper-customized, things like one-on-one lessons, consulting, those kind of things. And so by leveraging a marketing funnel like this, you can simplify what you offer and organize it in a way that is very easy for both you and your potential patrons to follow. Again, there is a link to the video before. It goes over a whole bunch of Patreon ideas for artists and musicians, but it can be applied to just about anyone using a Patreon. So with that said, that really does go over the whole kind of kit and caboodle of creating a content strategy for your Patreon. This can be applied to both creating free content to get people on your Patreon, as well as what the content you're actually going to provide to your patrons, how you can actually make sure that you're held accountable to make sure that you're following along with that, testing out different ideas to make sure that the patrons actually do like what you were posting, and ways for you to get the most bang for your buck out of the creation process so that you're being as effective a creator as possible. So with that said, that really is I think the end of this video. So if you found this useful, make sure you like and subscribe and all that stuff. I've been recently really diving into Patreon. I think it's going to be a really effective way for any musician and artist or creative really in general to make some extra money, but also provide a little bit more ownership of their career, especially where things like art can be screenshotted and music has no value because of like the MP3 boom and streaming and all that stuff. I think it's important to have some ownership over your career in form of kind of like owning your own fan base and that kind of thing. And this is a beautiful way to do it. So with that ramble out of the way, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one, and good luck on your Patreon that you're building, any of that stuff. And I'm sorry for rambling. See you in the next one. Have a good one.